And here we are, Mary MacCarthy. This is the first episode of Tech Bros. I am joined by my co-host, Lauren. Hi, Lauren.
Mary, how's it going, bro?
Bro, it's a bad day in the tech world because just like in the past hour, 12,000 layoffs happened, right, at Google.
We've got Wayfair layoffs today, Google layoffs today. LinkedIn was down apparently for the last 20 minutes or so. I think it's back up.
Twitter, right? Like, we're supposed to be live streaming to Twitter too. I don't think the live stream to Twitter is working because who knows if they have any infrastructure anymore. It's crazy times, but I am wearing my Patagonia. It doesn't have the label. The label's on the back, but I want everyone to know I'm wearing Patagonia, out of solidarity with everybody. But not to be too lighthearted about it, because it's a terrible thing to lose your job. So we do feel bad for anyone who was laid off. But better things are on the horizon. Let me do a quick little intro to this show. So every week, Lauren and I are going to be here on LinkedIn Live, probably on YouTube as well, whatever platforms happen to be working each week. And we're just going to talk about the things that other people aren't talking about in the tech world, amongst our very opinionated selves, and with the guests we've chosen that week who are specialized in the topic we've decided to dive into. This week, we're going to be pretty lighthearted about it. We're talking about a company that everybody knows, Airbnb, and bringing on a couple of the guys of the bros who worked there in the early days. We'll bring them on set in just about 5 minutes. Airbnb, of course, is one of those massive companies that we all know, right, Lauren? It's like a noun and a verb. It's part of today's world.
Yeah.
And tell us a little bit about the guests who are coming on, and then I'll do a little bit of background on Airbnb, which everybody knows about.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. And if anyone's streaming live, we want to hear the good and the bad Airbnb stories as well. And I think we'll go over a few of our own. But today on the show, we've got Tommy Dang, co-founder, CEO of Mage. They're doing orchestration in the data world. He's got a lot of data stories, battle stories from Airbnb. And we've got Robert Yee as well, co-founder, chief product officer at HyperQuery, another data play. Definitely very interested to hear. Like, I always love talking to people who worked at big tech companies and to hear like their data stories. Like, Mary, you come from a data background. I've done this for years, data engineering, analytics, everything like that. So I'm always excited to hear about war stories. So we'll get into that a little bit. And yeah, I'm excited to speak to both of them and hear what they're doing now and like how their experience at Airbnb and the complexity of the business of running Airbnb led to what they're building today.
Yeah, and I'm super curious more broadly how what we're seeing today coming out of the Valley technologically in trends, and then also these tougher things like the layoffs, how they think that maybe was born out of what they saw and experienced 10 years ago. So before we bring them on, here's the 60-second backgrounder on Airbnb. For those of you who don't know, of course, you'd have to be living under a rock to not know what Airbnb is. More likely renting out space of that rock you're living under.
Yes, right. You're right. You're under the rock and then you're renting out a third of it. The garage of the rock, and decorating it up and making that its own cash flow through Airbnb
for $1,000 a month if you're in the Bay Area.
Right.
It was founded in 2008, 2009 by Brian Chesky, Joe Gebbia, and Nate Blacharczyk. One of the VCs that they pitched to famously did not invest because he said, "Look, if you open up your home, your property to strangers, you're going to have bad things happen, like rapes and murder." That VC, of course, is kicking himself because Airbnb did launch to massive success. They're now in over 200 countries, 6 million properties listed on Airbnb, and they claim that they've served over 1 billion guests. So, McDonald's level in terms of the influence on the world in the market. The biggest financial obstacle that Airbnb faced was around 2020, start of the pandemic, when everyone was struggling. They laid off about a quarter of their workforce. They bounced back well enough to IPO later that year in December of 2020. So from a business standpoint, clearly Airbnb is, one of those unicorns that investors dream about having invested in. From a human standpoint, we all know there's a lot of critiques and growing critiques of Airbnb. We're not going to get too much into those, but I will say that those are critiques I strongly agree with in terms of it's a company that is contributing to the housing crisis in many cities around the world, certainly where I live in Los Angeles, where you live in New York, Lauren, and in places, as far-reaching as London, Paris, and Australia even, is, the media writing about how Airbnb in that way is a bad thing. Critiques also about how they kind of like Uber, facilitate the flouting of local laws and regulations, just come in and do your own thing, disrupt. But as someone who, I believe largely in laws, I think that's certainly not a good thing. And the final critique I'll mention is bringing it back to that initial investor who, decided not to invest in Airbnb because of things like rapes and murders happening. Those do happen in Airbnbs, just like in hotels, right? And some of the biggest, voices of dissent against Airbnb we've heard in recent years have been about how the company handles those things and a lack of transparency around it. So lots of good things to say about the company, lots of bad things to say, but we're going to hear from the people who are there. One last thing, Lauren, before we bring on Robert and Tommy, are you an Airbnber, like a customer?
I am an Airbnber, and I've never had a bad experience. I love Airbnb. So and this is one of the things we can even talk about a little bit. Airbnb, when it was held privately before it IPO'd, was actually cheaper a lot of times versus a traditional hotel. And you could get a nice room somewhere, separated from the house, or a separate unit, or your own private unit. And it would be a lot cheaper than staying in hotels in cities. Now, recently, there's a lot of cases where that's not true anymore. In some cases, it's actually more expensive. And, that's been a little bit controversial. But when I was younger, I'd graduated college, was looking to move to New York, didn't have a job lined up, didn't have any money. I stayed in an Airbnb, and it was very cheap. This is, like 10, 11 years ago. And I came up to New York, where I live now, and was renting Airbnbs as I was trying to find an apartment to lease. And so it actually enabled me to move to New York because I did, find someone who had an Airbnb, and I was, apartment hunting, definitely trying to get something very cheap for an apartment. And my Airbnb host actually had some friends who were looking to bring someone on, rent a room out, and that all worked out. And even today, I still use Airbnbs probably 3 to 4 times a year. I love using Airbnbs to visit like the cool parts of cities, not like the downtown areas. Like most recently, actually like 3 weeks ago for New Year's, I was in New Orleans, stayed in an Airbnb, stayed uptown. Not near the Bourbon Street, raucous party scene. But I like to use Airbnbs to stay in the hipster parts of towns, or the Brooklyns of whatever city it's in.
Yeah.
Stay in the Brooklyn of New Orleans. Stay in the Brooklyn
Disclaimer,
of
this is
Seattle.
Not, even if Lauren is a poster child for Airbnb use, this is not an ad for Airbnb.
Yeah. So I love Airbnb. I like it a lot as a consumer, and I use it a couple times a year. It's great.
Yeah. I'm the opposite. I use it a lot, when it was made a very affordable option. Now the prices in a lot of places have just gone crazy. So I'll still kind of check, but if the price of a hotel is the same or even a little bit more, I'm just going to go with that. That initial, again, low cost option to me is no longer there. That's one of the big critiques these days too. Like they add in these crazy cleaning fees, all that. So
yeah, all the fees. Right.
I'm not, no way an Airbnb at all. I prefer like a cheap hotel, frankly. Yeah, let's bring in Tommy and Robert. Maybe have them start just by telling us if they use Airbnb. Some of the people, I'm going to add them to the stream. Hi, Tommy. Hi, Robert. While you're getting settled in real quick, let me say hello to the people, or Lauren and I will say hello to the people who've joined us. Hey, Joe Reese, dialing in from probably Salt Lake, right, Joe? Good to see you. Hi, Meredith in Omaha. You're in Nebraska, Meredith. I forget where. Scott Taylor, the data whisperer, is dialing in from an Airbnb, which is awesome. And hi, Angela.
He's in an Airbnb right now
as we speak. Yes.
Oh wow.
So Robert and Tommy, do you guys use Airbnbs out of and why?
I mean, not to that extent. I'm not in one right now.
It looks like it.
I use it a lot. I do love it. We as a team use it as well for offsites and things like that. But also when traveling, it's like you said, Lauren. You get to stay in the awesome parts of town. And I remember there was a campaign for a long time that we called it "Live Like a Local" or "Travel Like a Local," and that means you're not just there on a big red bus being a tourist. You're actually experiencing the city and the community like a local. So that's one of the huge perks that for Airbnb living like that.
Awesome. All right, let's dive into the tougher stuff. Lauren, you want to stay? Robert and Tommy are friends of yours. I don't know how y'all know each other, but you know them best, so you start grilling them however you want to.
Oh no, I'm so scared.
No, I mean, I guess like Robert, we'll start with you. Like when did you work at Airbnb? Like, what were you doing there? And like, I would love to know what working at a company that scaled quickly. What were some of the tech problems or data problems that you faced there that maybe you wouldn't have faced anywhere else?
Yeah, that is a good question. So I was there from 2019 to 2020, so pre-IPO, but really close to the IPO. I was on the data science analytics team, but I got pulled in as basically a generalist data scientist. So I did things from like uplift modeling and some machine learning to some experimentation work to supporting the product team and doing some product analytics work. So really just ranged the gamut there. And then you asked what problems did I see there that I didn't see elsewhere. I think and Tommy could speak to this, I'm sure, as well, but the most I'd say groundbreakingly, astonishingly different thing about going to Airbnb was their data stack was just this behemoth of you got everything that you could possibly want already, and they've set it up for you. Right? Which I was at Wayfair before, not that way. We had like things in Hadoop, we had things in Vertica, spread all over the place. I guess relevant to HyperQuery, I think the problem that I'd seen most saliently was like, once you set up all the dashboards and have a nice data stack and the metric system and the experimentation layer, it's a lot, but like once you have that, all your time is spent on these like custom questions, right? And then you don't have a great tool for that. That's basically it. But yeah, I could get to that later.
Was it a challenge of working with all of these? Like I know like Minerva, which is like a metric system, came out of Airbnb. There's a lot of other stuff that's come out of Airbnb. I mean, even Airflow came out of Airbnb, correct? Back in the day, a couple of years ago. Like, all this like custom rolled stuff that has kind of moved to commercialized products now. Like, was that a challenge to work with there, or was that like kind of baked by the time you got there, or like how did that work? Like, would love to hear your thoughts on that.
Yeah, I can share a little bit about that. So, like Robert said, awesome behemoth tech stack. There's a pro and con of a giant company, awesome engineering company like Airbnb is. You just have so much talent and engineering resources. You build a lot of things internally. So you build a lot of proprietary things. And fortunately, some of those become standards, but also some of them aren't standards and they're just internal. And the great thing is, everything's built internally. So you have a ton of documentation, you have a ton of customization. But then, the con is sometimes we over-engineer things. And of course, we do use a lot of open source libraries, but the lower level libraries. But like Robert said, so many things are built internally. So you have access to a lot of things. And that's a really pro of working at a company like Airbnb is everything's built.
Tommy, remind us when you were there. What were your years?
2015 to 2020.
Okay. All right. Wow. Did you stay through the IPO?
So you really saw it grow.
Yes, it was really awesome. So I was there. We were less than 200 engineers. By the time I left, maybe around 2,000 in the product eng org, and then we all fit in like 2 floors of 888. In 2020, before like the big COVID hit, we were in 4 different buildings in SF, and Airbnb's office is amazing, by the way. I host people, other people would come to the office and from other companies, and they really love it. If you ever get a chance, every meeting room is designed after like another Airbnb in the world. You have something like Portland, you have Reykjavik, you have all these places. It's amazing. So you just never get tired. You actually enjoy going to meetings because you're just in another world every single time. So it's pretty awesome.
Awesome.
Yeah, I've been in the headquarters in San Francisco before, because there are a couple restaurants that are like on the ground floor, and weirdly enough, their restrooms are in the Airbnb headquarters. So if you're like, getting some tapas or getting a drink with someone, which are the situations I've been in when I've been in these restaurants, they're like, oh yeah, the bathroom's through there, and you just like go in and you're like in the Airbnb building, which is really funny.
Yeah.
Awesome.
So I would guess, like, working with an organization that's scaled very quickly, very complex, dealing with a lot of regulation, like, what were some of the biggest like challenges? Like, were you guys like pulling data for Brian Chesky? Was he like, hey, like what's going on in our Portugal market? How many, Portugal citizens are traveling from the US? Like what are our metrics? What's our concentration of visitors in this market versus this one? Like, how did that all work? And Robert, I know you have a blog, Win with Data. You talk about these types of things, being a SQL monkey versus delivering value, and like where it's gone wrong and right. No, and it's a great blog. Like, I'll plug your blog, like Win with Data.
Love it.
But yeah, like what was the worst part of working at a scaling, hyper-scaling organization? And what was the best part? And like, what did you learn from that?
That's such a great question. Worst part and best part, I'd say they were kind of the same thing. Like, worst and best, you had to learn to be flexible in this way that you wouldn't have to be otherwise, right? So I guess the story that I like to reference a lot is, like, I was pulled into a startup within a startup for a few months called Social Stays, which was directly reporting to Brian every day. And this, I mean, if you guys have ever done something like this, it's just extremely nerve-wracking.
Yeah.
I'd say 2 things that were interesting that came out of it. Like, one, this is really where I learned very clearly in a compressed span of time how chaotic analytics can be when your entire job is strategic support. We had all the dashboards we needed, but we still got in a room every day to answer a very specific set of strategic questions. And in the beginning, I was asked, like, hey, just do Mad Lib analytics, fill out this doc to support our claims for Brian. And I'm like, I'm not doing that. And like, learning how to like push back against that took a while. You can't just to dive into that a little bit, like, you can't just like be pedantic and optimize for rigor and pushback. You really have to figure out like what your objective is, think like a PM a little bit more. So like, getting into that mindset was one of the most difficult things for me to learn. The second thing that came out of this whole thing was that was maybe of interest to you guys is like the Social Stays program. It was like this thing where we were trying to like get people to stay with like chefs, with Olympians, with like different categories of folks, which we thought was really interesting. But it was also like right before the pandemic hit. Obviously this company was incredibly fast. Like, one day I'm pulling these queries for the CEO, and the next day he's like, we're not doing this anymore.
Was that canned? Social Stays didn't happen?
Completely canned. And it was a huge, as an IC at the time, I was like WTF, like, I've just been working on this for 3 months. But as a founder, I'm like, that's like amazing ability to pivot when you see the market changing, right? Like, Brian just put his foot down. I was like, this doesn't make any sense. Like, no one's going to want to stay with anybody else, right?
Wow, I vaguely remember that too, that social stage thing, because I think like Alton Brown was one of the people or something in there, and it's like, you know, you can do all of these cool social stays. But Tommy, let me ask you the same question. Like, you know, you were there 5 years, so you saw it like earlier all the way up to like the IPO. Like, what were your or at least like leading up to the IPO, what were your like hardest things you had to learn and deal with, and what was your best part of working there?
Yeah, so one thing I do want to share, one of the big pros just at Airbnb, almost throughout my entire time there, is we have these we have many core values, but one of them is called the serial entrepreneur. And cereal is spelled like the food cereal, and it's a homonym for cereal, and then serial repeat. And it comes from a story. First, what it means is, you know, don't let your role define your responsibility. Do whatever it takes to deliver the best experience for the end user, the customer, the guest, the host. And that means go out of what you're assigned to do. Just try things, just to do whatever it takes. And how that reflects in our day-to-day at Airbnb is you're empowered to do anything. And so the story behind the serial entrepreneur is back in 2008 or so. Airbnb, you know, it was Joe, it was Brian, it was Nate. They were running out of money. They had these binders, you know, the 3x3 binders, baseball cards. They had them with their credit cards. They were running out of money, and it was coming up with the presidential election. They created these cereal boxes, and they put with the design of McCain and Obama, and they sold it. They made enough money to stay afloat. And so that was a story for all of us. Like, all of us, we're all owners, we're all part owners. So we need to be entrepreneurial in the way we address problems, in the way we address opportunities. And how that played out is, you know, you can switch teams, you can join different teams. On the teams you're at, you can go out and do partnerships with other teams, work together, collaborate on projects. We used to have like tons of hackathons, and some projects would make it to production. Also, as an engineer, if you had enough time in your spare time and you wanted to do something in production, you could totally do it, get a team to snap off on it, and then bam, you have a feature. And, you know, you run an experiment, it works well, then you take it to some EM or PM, and be like, look, I built this behind the scenes, it's working, we just have to support it now. So you can just really do a lot of things like that. And, you know, the sky's the limit at a company like Airbnb. So those were some of the pros. I have a funny story as well that similar to what Robert was talking about, pulling data. So I joined this early team called Magical Trips, and I send data about experiences. If have you never done an experience, you should totally do it. It's super fun. And I was pulling data for this, and I was sending it to Brian, to Jobot, to some folks, some senior leadership on the team. And here's a lesson as well about pulling data. You might want to triple check it, right? So I was triple checking things. I was asking for peer review, okay? But then I got comfortable. And so then I started, you know, double checking and not asking for peer review. And then you're sending it. The lesson is you never know how it's going to be used, because then for one of them that I checked, it was like stats on experiences breaking down by type, by category, by country, etc. He tweeted it out without even letting anybody know. And of course, you know, he's just going to do it. So you never know how it's going to. And so as soon as he tweets it, I start sweating, like, oh my goodness, let me check it again. Let's hopefully it works. And then it checked out, thank goodness. But you never know when it's going to be used. So always check your data, always get people to review it. So that's another funny story about pulling data.
Oh my God, Tommy, that's terrifying.
I like that a lot. And Robert, I saw Robert laughing during that whole your recollection there. So the CEO, I'm guessing you're talking about Brian here, Brian Chesky, was tweeting out like what you'd pulled as like data, like tweeting it out publicly to probably his 5 million followers or something. Yes,
Brian, he's very active on there. It's another story and it has to do with Twitter. And this is also another lesson outside of just tech is if you have a challenge with a company, let's say a bad experience, yes, send an email, but Twitter's very powerful for the founders or the leaders at companies that really care. They will respond to it as quickly as possible. On one of our teams, we had a joke. When systems go down, you have Sev 2, Sev 1, Sev 0. Sev 0 is really bad. Yeah. We say it's Sev 0, 0 when it makes it
0, 0.
Brian's going to be telling you about that.
Right.
And so because he's really responsive on there. If you post something like a pain point or a concern or anything, he's on top of that. And so it just really shows the reflection of, he changed one of his titles to head of community because as a founder, he really he just was so in tune with the community. So that's another his Twitter.
So what you're describing, Tommy, is kind of the culture of, move fast, break things. As someone within it, as a one of the technical people, and you, Robert, as the data people, there's a certain excitement to that, and amazing things are happening. Obviously, it's an amazing product. What are the downsides, or as much as you thrived in it, I can see from the way you talk about it. Robert, I can't tell as much. He seems a little bit on the fence whether you loved or hated that environment. But what were the bad sides, or maybe to you there weren't any? I don't know.
Really have to pull from the compendium of things. You push those things down. So let me think. Tommy,
while Robert thinks, I'll talk from the engineering side. I'll talk from the engineering side of what Robert thinks about that. So you did mention move fast, break things. Mm-hmm. We were moving really fast, and things were breaking eventually. So as an engineering org, we did a 180, 360, whatever degrees enough to turn around, where we spent a long time just increasing tech quality. We actually made tech quality an engineering trait on performance reviews. And so it's now you're incentivized, or you're even desensitized, where if you don't have good monitoring, observability, data checks, data validations, all these things. And so we spent a lot of time getting that up to par, and it actually really turned things around. So that was one of the cons, because then you have so many people building things and things getting taken down so many times, so many on call. So that was a con for moving fast and building things. But as long as you capture it and then you do something to turn around, and we spent probably at least a year or more on that. So that was one of the cons.
So would you credit sort of good technical leadership with, making sure?
Absolutely. So yes, absolutely. So our CTO, Ari Velo, he's amazing. He's amazing. I forget exactly the year he joined, but when he joined, things started turning around on the tech quality part. Just because, we were at a different stage of Airbnb. We were preparing for IPO, so we needed to clean up a lot of the data. We needed our services to stop going down. And so it was time to put the brakes on development for a little bit, and then just double down on our defenses.
Awesome. Did you?
Cool. And here's a question that you both were there pre-IPO, and Tommy, you'd worked there for a few years. Robert, you were there for a year or so before an IPO. When you started the job, and each of you have different stories. How did you think about compensation from a perspective of salary, plus a bonus structure if you had a bonus structure, versus equity in a company that was probably going to go public one day and was probably going to go be this big success that IPO'd and everything. Just in general, how did you think about that, and how do you think some of our listeners who are evaluating companies and trying to understand total compensation and how that works, what did you learn, and how did you think about that? And what are some lessons that you may have for other people who are thinking about, joining these hyperscaler type organizations? And Robert, I'll ask you that first.
Sure. I mean, I think Tommy would actually have a more interesting take on this, given he joined when there was more risk. I mean, I joined early, beginning of 2019. Things for me, I was Airbnb is what I use, similar to you, Lauren. I used it during college. It was the cheap option, and it had developed this brand that was ingrained in my mind as the only thing to use. So I didn't see a lot of risk in I basically treated the equity as cash, right? I was I'm gonna 90% chance that this is gonna pan out for me. So let's just view it that way.
Sure.
But I'm sure in the early days, Tommy, I'd love to get your take on how you balance that.
Thank you. Similar to what Robert said, I agree as well. I joined 2017, so it wasn't mainstream yet, but it wasn't it didn't seem like it was going to fail though, because they raised a good amount of money. And even before joining Airbnb, I just read so much about their blogs, their engineering, their design is amazing. So they were like an up and coming star. And so, you know, worst comes to worst, they don't IPO, they're still gonna exit with like a very successful exit. So it wasn't as risky as joining like a Series A company or Series B company. So equity was like not a sure bet. You can never be too sure, but it was pretty solid, right? But at the time, also, I was aware that equity is something that can double, triple, quadruple, 10x, and salary can't. So one tip I would give people is it's really hard to tell a company, right? The sooner you join it, the more risk it is, the more upsides you get. So you gotta really think about salary cannot double, does not triple often. Equity does. Equity 10x's. The upsides of equity is insane. So if you join a startup, are you joining for a salary? Like you can make giant salaries doing many different things, right? But you don't get equity that 10x's in many industries. So ask yourself, what are you joining for, and what are you trying to get out of it? But also, I joined Airbnb early on. It wasn't actually for the salary; it was for the learning experience. I thought I would learn a lot. I was wrong. I learned more than my brain can fathom. And so it was amazing. I met some of my best friends. I met some of the smartest people there. It was an awesome life there. So I joined because I thought I would get like a 1% of that, and I ended up getting a lot more.
Are you both really rich now? Can I borrow some money?
I think I'm rich in friendships and connections and things like that. So, but poor money wise. So startup. You're wrong, and I'm poor money wise. So I can share some of my other richness.
Yeah. Well, you're both.
I joined too late.
You joined too late. Gotcha. Yeah. You're both founders now. Should we move into that? You've left Airbnb and gone on to found your own company. Did you want to move on to that now, Lauren, or did you want to talk some more?
Yeah, let's get into that. And so, we'll go one by one here. I mean, Robert, you're Chief Product Officer, co-founder of HyperQuery. Would love to hear about what you're doing now, what the problem statement is, and maybe how that was discovered at Airbnb, or how your Airbnb experience, led into that, and what you're solving for and what you're doing now. So I'll start with you.
Yeah, sure. Happy to give a quick background. I'd say that the core problem I felt at Airbnb, which led to the transpiring of HyperQuery, was, as I mentioned, like once you figure out, I think everyone is focused on the modern data stack, right? You're like, let's build up this ecosystem of getting data, ETLing it, transforming it, creating these beautiful data models, setting up the core metrics, setting up the core dashboards, semantically, all that jazz. The thing that gave us some at Airbnb that really peeled back the curtain on the future for me was, I realized once you figure this out, your time gets entirely filled up doing custom analyses, right? It's 95% custom analyses. You don't need to maintain any dashboards because there's like 4,000 and you just need to pick one and send it to someone. And so, we had, the fundamental problem is that we just had no tool purpose built for doing this work, right? We had the Jupyter Notebook, of course, with its like SQL magic functions, but it just wasn't easy to do your work there. So you'd revert to your IDE, you'd take notes elsewhere, you'd get this disparate hodgepodge of work, sort of entropying out into different tools and then not really being seen by anybody. So we wanted to make a tool that was, really built from the ground up to help teams. Sorry, I just took a red eye, so I'm a little bit like, I need to remember our pitch. Do all your work very, very quickly, but also like give the rest of the org good visibility into what you're doing, and really give analytics teams a home, right? Not just another technical tool. If that makes sense.
Yeah, and are you selling to mostly analysts or data engineers, or maybe like a biz ops team that wants to do analytics better, or maybe all of the above? Like who's your like target market?
It's all analysts and data scientists who are focusing on like product analytics side of things. Yeah.
Cool.
Awesome. Yeah. I love it. HyperQuery. And Tommy, what's your founder story?
Yeah. Before I start, I do want to echo what Robert said. Everything was everywhere. So people were writing their analyses in like Markdown files in various GitHub repos. People were using Google Docs, right? Depending on the team and who you're reporting to, you use Google Docs. We had so much data in Quip as well. So it was like Quip, Google Docs.
Oh my God, Quip.
And people were saving their ad hoc SQL queries in subqueries in Superset or in GitHub Enterprise. And so it was all over the place. And I remember it was very hard. Like it was very hard to do these ad hoc analysis. Also, Superset's amazing, but sharing them out to, let's say, some VP somewhere or some director somewhere, you can't really annotate it, or you can, like you can hack it together. You add a text
comment.
Yeah, exactly, and you put it on top, right? But so absolutely what Robert mentioned. It's a huge gap, and it was all over the place there. So it's really awesome what they're doing and what HyperQuery is doing.
Wait 1 second. Did Superset come out of Airbnb as well?
Yes.
Am I correct in that? Yeah. Right. Okay.
Yep. Awesome. So hello everyone. My name is Tommy. I worked at Airbnb. I'm the CEO and one of the co-founders at Mage. Actually, our other co-founder, Shayu, she was at Airbnb for almost 4 years as well. We worked together the whole time, so it's pretty awesome. I worked on many different things. I worked on a lot of dev tools, data tools. I also worked on the early team Magical Trips, which is now the experiences business. So that was super fun. So some problems I saw at Airbnb. Well, the one was, we mentioned it before. Remember, there's the data stack, huge, awesome, amazing, proprietary. However, a lot of those tools, there's so many of them, they're built, what I saw was they were built in a way that was very specific for teams, specific for ICPs, different roles. And I would see that there were some developers that had trouble using some of these tools. Now, some of those tools were like BigHead, for example, is our end-to-end machine learning platform. In addition, also Airflow. Everybody had to use Airflow. It was great. It worked great for at Airbnb, but there was also lots of pros and cons there as well. So I left in 2020 and I started Mage. Our first product was actually this end-to-end machine learning platform, but for people that aren't machine learning experts. And it made it really easy. You come to this UI, you upload data, or you can ingest data from different sources. It pulls that data together. You use this GUI to transform the data, and we do some auto ML for you, and we deploy it. It's end-to-end stuff. And so that was our initial product. And we built a lot of technology underneath that, particularly the ingestion, the transformation part of it. We also did the whole feature store and feature serving part, but we decided earlier this year to open source the ingestion and data pipeline piece of it. And that's been working out really, really awesome, getting tons of adoption and traction there. And so we decided to focus all of our energy and attention on that. So what we open source was a modern replacement for Airflow.
Yeah, no, that's awesome. And so, you come from the organization where Airflow, the genesis of Airflow. And, I look at the orchestration type of space. There's Airflow, there's, MWAA and Amazon, there's Google's version, which is Cloud Composer, there's Astronomer. Astronomer just had some layoffs, actually. I think they're the ones maintaining most of the Apache project now that maintains Airflow. And then you've also got Prefect, you've got Dagster in there. I mean, I guess my question, Tommy, I'll put you on the spot a little bit, is how are you better? How are you different? And why are you the best, when there's a couple other options out there? And why should people be looking at you?
Yes, I can go on and on about this, but I'll just highlight one part. It's our core focus on easy developer experience. That's one of our core design principles. What does easy developer experience mean? It means easy setup, fast setup. It means enjoyable. There's so many tools out there, technology. There's so much great technology, but when it comes down to it, you're serving a human being. A human being's not a robot. They don't care about the bits and the binaries and this and that. They don't speak robot language. They're human. They're doing work. They have to enjoy what they're doing. They have to be fulfilled and not have to pull their hair out as they're using a tool and not have to read a thick yellow page book to know how to use it. And so we really focus on developer experience. And how does this actually materialize? Well, when you use Mage, yes, you still write a lot of code to build your data pipeline, but you get this awesome user experience. It's like a notebook experience, actually. And as you build out, you can execute your code. So let's say I want to load some data somewhere. I can type in the code, and then I can immediately execute that cell or block and see the results. That way, I don't have to build out this giant DAG, wait, deploy it in a staging, wait around, and see if it works or not, and see that it fails, and have to rebuild that. So we make that experience really, really easy. In addition, make it really easy to reuse. Why repeat your code? So inside of Mage, a huge design differentiation that we have from all the other ones is as you build out your pipeline, every step in your pipeline is its own individual file. And we separate the dependency logic, how each step is coordinated. We separate that from the actual underlying execution logic. The reason why is, imagine you had to use, for example, Airflow. You had to do DAG, dot add task or task, and the double greater than sign. Well, if you write that inside of your file, how are you supposed to reuse that in other pipelines? So we make it really modular and reusable. So those are some of the many ways we really focus on developer experience, and that's how we really differentiate ourselves. And that might be easy to say. That's like saying every consumer app out there really cares about the user experience design, and that's just not true. Airbnb showed this. Airbnb was at the forefront, really design focused. And design isn't how things look; it's actually how things feel and work. Right, and so they really showed us how design and a true focus on it can really differentiate your product and brand from everything else.
Super cool. No, I'm excited for Mage and where you're going, and HyperQuery as well. I mean, I guess, Mary, what other questions do we have before we wrap it up here? And if anyone's out there, feel free to ask a question in the comments as well.
Yeah, I'll ask your question, Lauren, and maybe you'll phrase it better than I am. So I'll just start it. That obviously I haven't used HyperQuery or Mage, heard good things, but the modern data stack, just like the broader economy, has changed, since you both founded in the past couple of years. Realities about, what we can do with and what we need to do with data have changed. Broadly, how optimistic are you about the future of your companies? I mean, it's a tough market to be in. There's so much competition. Again, even with excellent products. I would.
Yeah, and I think, yeah.
I'd rather be in a cushy role at Airbnb.
Yeah, and to add on to that, there's a lot of companies that have come out of, Lyft, your Ubers, LinkedIn. I mean, I can name a bunch of Apache projects, a bunch of managed stuff on these. That came out of all these complex tech companies. And one of the criticisms, I guess, is, oh, well, yeah, this is great if you have these problems at this scale, but I'm just a Shopify store selling t-shirts and I need to know my LTV. And yeah, I've got a couple of data sources. I guess we bring them into Snowflake. I don't really know. I'm the CEO. We bring them into Snowflake and they tell me it goes out to this. When you move down market a little bit, and most companies aren't operating at the scale of your Ubers, your Airbnbs and Lyfts. How do you design that into your solution? Knowing that you come from these backgrounds of solving massive problems at massive scale to solving, problems for companies that, maybe have smaller problems and smaller issues. And how do you orient the product around that? And Robert, I'll start with you.
Yeah, these are such great questions, and I love this.
Questions at you, so maybe just
yeah. I mean, I guess I'll start with Lauren, since it's clear in my mind, and then I'll go back to Mary about the modern data stack. But I'd say this. Lauren, obviously, like when you're solving a big tech company problem, you're really solving a problem that only becomes a problem when you've solved all your other problems, if that makes sense. So then solving these problems, if you were to be pessimistic about like founders like us coming out of companies like Airbnb, like solving those problems blindly probably won't produce a widely relevant business. That said, I think Tommy and I are both making bets that aren't so blind. Like, I think the question comes down to, like, are we building something that's predicated on a very specific set of circumstances that don't generalize to the rest of the world, like circumstances that the rest of the world might not even ever match, or have we discovered some sort of underlying current where the world will ultimately settle, simply by the virtue of the fact that companies like Airbnb have peeled back the curtain into the future in some subtle way, right? Like, are we correct in say building roads in anticipation of a post-car world, right? I think both Tommy and I, it's weird that we're both on here, and this wasn't planned really, but like Tommy and I think are both making like interface bets, right? We see that the world organically built up from tools like Jupyter on our end and Airflow on Tommy's end, and then we realized after using them in the worlds where the base responsibilities are no longer your problem, they kind of suck for the rest of everything that you got to do, right? Does that make sense?
No, it does make sense. You're assuming that like Jupyter is a good tool and that Airflow is a good tool, and a lot of people use them, and they do. You're building a better version of what the incumbent is out there, which is already, and the incumbent is widely distributed.
Exactly. And obviously, I mean, it's just quickly, I'll let Tommy chime in here too, but like to Mary's point on the modern data stack, I think, Lauren, you have a lot of opinions on this. I actually want to hear your opinion, really, but I mean, a lot of our success is probably going to be predicated on whether or not the modern data stack continues to have some sort of a stranglehold on mindshare as a gold standard for companies. Like, I mean, I don't think it's absolutely necessary that Snowflake and Fivetran and DBT eat the world for us to succeed, but it certainly helps create a model of how you can set up a data stack, so that way, we can slot in once those problems are solved.
Yeah.
But I'm optimistic. I think you hear about folks cutting data teams, and we see like some churn just because of like the analytics team is gone. So, but I think on the whole, people are realizing like it's not just about cutting costs, but data and analytics. Like on the other side of the coin, people are realizing it can be like an incredible value center, right? It's just about like making that more visible, making that more provable, and at least for us, like we believe like our tool can help you get there, right?
Absolutely.
Okay. Pitch over. Sorry, that was a long spiel. My soapbox is over there now. Tommy, do you want to?
No, I agree with, like, I don't think the skills are going anywhere. I don't think the outcomes are going anywhere. I just think what we call the people, I'm this job title, I'm that job title. All right, maybe a data team doesn't need to do this. Maybe ops can do most of this.
Yeah.
Or maybe data engineering does most of this. And like, instead of having more people, be on this supply chain within a company, maybe you only need like 2 steps. And so I think all the principles are there already. I just think that like, it's all going to, have to come together at some point is my general opinion on things.
Yeah.
To put it nicely, I've got spicy on various things. But no, Tommy, I'm curious. Mary and I are curious to hear your opinion on like, solving problems at scale, building your product. Which how do you look at like solving problems for maybe a company that doesn't have that scale, and yeah, where do you see the market going in the next 2 to 3 years, and how did that inform your business?
So a lot of what Robert said, I echo, and the problems that we've solved at Airbnb, they then you can say it's big company problems, but they've gotten to a place where they're solving certain problems that they've faced along the way. And as entrepreneurs like Robert and I, we take those learnings and we try to either generalize them to a specific core audience. It could be cut up by industry, by team, by stage, etc. And then the word I like to use is accessible. We make this giant, awesome tech that seemingly cut off from the world, only reserved for awesome tech companies. We make it more accessible to a wider audience. And so it's exactly what Robert said in terms of that. Now, there are some tools out there that are big company problems only. For example, we have this awesome ML platform inside Airbnb called BigHead. And it's this end-to-end platform. You got your feature store, you got your model training, you got Docker, this and that. I don't think you need that for even a team of, I don't know, you probably want that if you have a team of 20 machine learning engineers, which means you have probably a team of hundreds of engineers, right? So that, I understand. But for the most part, a lot of the big company problems you solve can be extrapolated and then can be applied in different scenarios. And anything can be made more accessible. When you build only for engineering inside of a company, you don't think about accessibility. You're like, you have to use my tool. This is the only service that does X, Y, Z. You cannot go anywhere else and buy it. So just use it. Here is a lack of API docs and good luck. Now, in the real world, you can't get away with that. Everyone has like a menu platter to choose from so many different tools. So it comes down to, honestly, like the best design, the most accessible wins. And that comes back to our future. And Brian taught Robert and I this, that competitors don't kill you, your customers do. So just focus on that. So how do we win? We just keep focusing on our customers. While other people get so obsessed with their competitors, what they do, like just keep pulling their hair, just focus on the customers, build loyalty, be loyal to your customers, and then they'll reciprocate that. So that's how we'll survive.
Awesome.
Love it.
No, excellent. Yeah, I mean, we can wrap it up here. Robert, where can people find you? Where can they learn more about you? Where can they learn more about HyperQuery? Yeah, go plug yourself for a minute.
Yes, I love it. I mean, find me on Twitter. I should post a lot, but
so does everybody.
Yeah, I'm on Twitter. I'm on LinkedIn. Find me. I also
Can you find us in your Substack, your newsletter?
Yeah, I do have a weekly or bi-weekly, depending on how often I have time to write, Substack called Win with Data. So check that out.
Win with Data. Okay.
I mix in some philosophical things about HyperQuery with spicier takes every so often. So it's
awesome. I didn't know your newsletter, so that's great.
Yeah.
And how about you, Tommy? Where can we find you?
Yes, I don't have an awesome newsletter like Robert's, but subscribe to his. If you want to subscribe to mine, just go subscribe to his. But I love hanging out on LinkedIn, but I also love having one-on-one conversations with people in Slack. So if you want to chat, go to mage.ai/chat, CHAT. It'll join our Slack. And if you just look on there, I'm like talking to a ton of people. I love talking to people one-on-one. We hop on calls. So come there and let's chat.
Love it. Love it. I think this is the longest show I've ever done. So yay for us. And thanks, guys, for your patience. Lauren, did you want to just mention some of our upcoming shows? You want to do that real quick?
Yeah, this is our inaugural episode. We're gonna go really spicy on a few here in the next couple. Next week, I think we're gonna talk about DevRel and evangelism. Is DevRel dead? Some people say it is. What is DevRel? What is evangelism? What is developer advocacy? How do these three roles relate? We've gotten all kinds of people who've weighed in on these. Some people think DevRel should report to advocacy. Some people say, why have we layered this?
Some people say,
what makes this work? Like where's the marketing /PM /outbound /actually advocating for developers? How does it all play together? How do you do it right? How do you do it wrong? If you're doing it wrong, how do you correct it? So we're going to have that one. We're going to have an adult episode. Is the adult industry actually just tech? Everyone's probably seen the Silicon Valley TV show episode where, Richard and the Pied Piper people their company's on the line. They get an adult video company and then they screw it up because, it's an HBO funny TV show. But we're gonna go into that.
I think we can say porn. You're saying adult industry, but I think
we can say porn. I have no problem saying porn. I don't want to say, if Tommy and Robert are okay with me saying porn, I'll say porn. But and then we're gonna do another one too. Like is the cloud a scam? And the cloud means a lot of things. The cloud can be networking, deploying apps on the cloud. There's the whole data cloud, which heavy GCP. GCP is a heavy data cloud player. Snowflake, biggest software IPO of all time, is the data cloud. Like what works and what doesn't in that. That's going to be another episode. So we're going to get some spicy ones here the next couple of episodes.
Yeah.
And
you guys
it's going to be fun.
You guys are the initial tech bros. If we had t-shirts, we'd send them to you. Someday we will. So you're always welcome back. For everyone who chimed in and watched, thanks for watching. We'd love to hear your ideas for guests and topics. And the gist of our show really is just we want to get past the content marketing stuff, all of the PR fluff that you hear on most of these podcasts that really, excuse the term, but I already said have become kind of like a circle jerk, and we're tired of that. Nobody wants to read that or listen to it. We're trying to bring a different flavor to the public's discussions happening, whether it's on YouTube, LinkedIn, the Slack communities, all of that, wherever tech bros gather, thrive, and fester. So thank you, everybody. We will see you next time, and have a wonderful Friday and weekend.
See you, everyone.
Bye. Thanks, both.
Thanks for having us.